So today we are going to learn about something that you know and you've heard about. And you can't say you are in workforce department, yet you don't know this concept. So the concept we'll be talking about is how to do forecast using Excel. But we'll just focus on one technique. We have various techniques of doing forecast in call center. But what I'll teach you is the basic one, the one that you can easily apply in your day-to-day operations or when you are doing planning. So this is what we normally do actually. So mnasemanga ati WFM tuma forecast sijui tuoneshe this our interval, how many calls are we expecting. So we really need to know how we can derive the forecast from historical data. So what I have here at the moment, this is calls data. For instance, I might have maybe data for the past, let's say 2 months or 3 months, right? So this data is organized in terms of dates, and then we have the arrival patterns per interval. These are the volumes, the calls that are coming into the center. And then these are just derived from this. So we have day, and also we have the week number. So
Fred,
yes.
are you presenting anything?
Oh, kumbe leo nimepatikana. Sorry about that. I'm not presenting anything. My presenting sorry. Na hata mniambiki na agiati. Na nyinyi tu mko hapo mnaona.
Me actually thought nikaona to take through it before you start presenting. Kidogo weze kusema day and week.
Poleni. So this is what I'm talking about. So I'm saying we need to learn how to do forecast. And we'll utilize one simple technique that is beginner friendly. So we'll use just simple averages to do our forecast. Now, so what you are seeing currently here on my screen, this is historical data. So you can have data, for instance, for the past 3 months or 2 months or even 1 month. So it depends on the horizon that you want to do your forecast. So, but we normally say if you have like minimum of 6 weeks data is the best for you to do the forecast for the next 1 month, because that is the most recent data. So we cannot go too much far into the past for us to use that historical data to do maybe the forecast for the next 1 month. So when we take the most recent data, for instance, the data for the last 6 weeks, it will be able to give us an idea on how the call patterns are per date and also per interval. So this is just a sample data set. It is a 1 month data. So specifically, this is the month of December data. So what we want to do is we want to do the forecast for January. So we're gonna call volumes that December. This is from 1st till 31st. And then we have the day, and also we have the week number. So note that these columns B and E, I've just derived them from column A, where we have the date. So it is very important because whenever we are doing the forecast, we need to know on a day-on-day basis, how many calls can we expect? For instance, how many calls can we expect to get on a Sunday, on Monday, on Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on? We also need to know in a typical week, the call volumes that we might expect. So actually, when we talk about forecast, it's not that we are trying to predict, but we are just trying to make an informed judgment about the expected number of calls or volumes that we expect. So we don't aim to be exact because we do not know what will happen in the future. So the future is uncertain, but we can just have a rough idea or a rough estimate of what we can expect. So when you have this data, make sure to add these two columns for day and the week number. So I did this to get the day by simply extracting from the date by taking the text function. I think we learned about the text function when we started our training to extract day from date and also to extract the week number from date. So after doing that, we need to now know the number of unique weeks that we have. So you simply take this, come and remove duplicates. Now you have these unique weeks. That is week 49, week 50, 51, and 52. So I'll only use till week 52. So this is 4 weeks data. But remember, I said using at least 6 weeks is the best. But I'm using this just for illustration purposes and for you just to get the concept. And then after doing that, we also have to know the unique intervals that we have. So if a shift is starting, for instance, at 6 a.m. and ending at midnight, so, and if we intend to do an hourly forecast, that is, we intend to forecast calls on an hourly basis. So you can either decide to do it on an hour basis or by 30 minutes interval. So for instance, if we decided to do by 30 minutes, it could be for instance, 6 a.m. to 6:30, then 6:30 to 7, and so on. But if we are doing per hour interval, it will be 6 to 7, then 7 to 8. So we do all that till midnight. So after doing that, you have to organize your data nicely. So you have to organize your data into weeks. So what you are seeing in my second sheet is the historical data that we have, but now we've organized it into weeks. So what we've just done here, these are the weeks: week 49, week 50, week 51, and week 52. So here is what we intend to do. So we want to estimate on average on each day of the week per hour interval, how many calls have we been getting in the last 4 weeks? That is what we want to achieve. So for us to do that, so this table was empty. We need to do what? We need now to find the averages of each day, whether it is on a Monday at 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. hour interval, how many calls did we receive in week 49? Now, and we'll make the use of average ifs because we want to get the number of calls that we received on a Monday at 6 a.m. during week 49. So a simple average ifs or a nested average ifs will help us to find the number of calls that we received on Monday at this hour interval. So we'll just say is equals to average ifs. But what are we averaging? We are averaging the number of calls received per particular day of the week. So per particular day of the week, so I'll highlight this day. So I've highlighted that whole column and simply looking. So I've highlighted the day column, but what we really want on the day is the day of the week, which is here on a Monday. I intend to drag it across. I lock it there and then put a comma. And then that is one argument. That is one condition. The second condition, we have to match the day and the hour interval. So I'll go back to my data, highlight column B, where we have the hour interval. And then we have to specify the hour interval that we are looking at. So we are looking at this interval here. So our second condition has been highlighted. Then the third condition, we are not just finding the number of calls offered on a Monday at this hour interval. So we have also to specify the week that we are working with. So we are working with week 49. So I'll go back to my data, highlight the week. Like that. And then highlight, just I'm putting dollar signs to lock. And then we have to specify the week. Now here it's week 49, which is C2. And we have to lock. Summer. Then we just press enter. And then we get the number of calls that we expect to get in week 49 on a Monday at 6 to 7 a.m. our interval. So what we are just doing is dragging this and then dragging this across as well. So the thing is, what I've just done, it's the same concept is applied for other week as well. So for week 50, we do the averages the way I've demonstrated for week 49. Do the averages. We know the number of calls received per interval for particular days of that week. Do the same for week 51. Know the number of calls received per interval per particular day of the week. Do the same for week 52 as well. Just finding the averages. The number of calls received per interval per that day of the week. So after doing that now, we have again to come and do the forecast now for a typical week. So remember, I'm talking about a typical week. For instance, if my month January, it's from 1st till 31st. So, for which we intend to do the forecast for those days. But when I say a typical week, for instance, if for instance in week 52 on a typical Monday, I received maybe 1,915 calls. I expect approximately the same behavior on another Monday towards the new year. So I expect almost the same number of calls, because here we'll come and do the averages for the Mondays. So first of all, we've determined the number of calls that we expect to receive per particular days of the weeks that I've mentioned. So we need to do now a typical week forecast that we intend will replicate in the month of January. So we'll come here and do the average now per day. So we'll take averages, for instance, of Mondays. So we'll come and do average for Mondays. I take this Monday, and then I also come, I highlight this Monday as well, comma. And then the other Monday as well. And then this Monday for week 49. And then I simply close the bracket. So on average for a particular Monday at 6 a.m. interval, that is 6 to 7, I expect 27 calls. On a typical Tuesday, I expect 15 calls. Typical Wednesday, 13. Typical Thursday, 12. A typical Friday will have 18 calls. And a typical Saturday will have 11 calls at this hour interval. That is 6 to 7 a.m. interval. So I'll do that, and I simply drag the formula this way, capture, and then also drag the formula down here. So what I'm having now is a typical forecast for the month of January for a particular week. So remember, typical means I can select any week at random and expect almost the same number of calls. So after doing this, you have the forecast for a typical week. We have now to do this forecast per day. That is per day, I mean, I need 1st January, nijue volumes zitakuwa ngapi. 1st, 2nd, 3rd, till let's say even 31st of January. We want to know how many calls can we get, or the forecast for January in general. So remember, I have said the number of calls we expect for instance on a typical Monday should not have a big variability on a week-on-week basis. Now, so what we need to do right now, let me clear this. what we need to do right now. So let's take for instance, you've had this forecast for a typical week for the month of January. Now here we are talking about Jan. So we want to do this now to take into daily forecast. Now, so what we need to do is simply combine the concepts that we've learned, the index and match function. And I'll show you how it is scanning in. So I'll say is equals to index. Remember the arguments that I told you, or the syntax for index. So you have to specify the array, the map where your data is. So we'll say it's equals to index. And then come and specify now where your range is. Here is your range. So lock that range so that it doesn't move. So it doesn't move. Then after doing that, simply put a comma. So introduce the first match function. So we say match. The first match function, in our case, remember we begin by the vertical lookup. Is this here, A3. And where are we looking this at? Where is the array? The array is here. The array is here. Here is the array. So we simply lock this, and also we lock this one and this one as well. And then we need an exact match. So the first match function is done. We introduce the second match function. So the second match function, what are we really matching? So we need to match the day of the week. You can see how I've organized this. You can see the days of the week in row 1. So this is the day of the week that I need to highlight. And I'll have to drag this across. So if I have to drag that across, then I have to put a $sign after the letter. And then specify the lookup array. So the lookup array here is this. Because here is where we have days of the week. So also lock this way. And then also lock here. Lock here as well. And remember, you need an exact match. Now, and then close twice. So you have now on 1st Jan at 6 a.m. or at 6 to 7 a.m. interval, you expect to have 13 calls. So drag this. Also drag this. So you have the forecast for all days of the month, and it is broken down per hour interval. right? So right now, your projections or your forecast is roughly 62,000 calls for this month, 62,783 calls. So that is a simple way. If call volumes are stable enough, we can use the use of averages. And I've shown you how to do that. First, begin by doing the weekly averages, the way I've done here. The weekly averages like this, for at least 6 weeks. 6 weeks is ideal. So, but I've used 4 weeks for illustration. But either way, if we could be having 6 weeks, we could include the other 2 weeks as well. So get the forecast for a typical week. So, and how do you do that? Simply take the averages of the weeks per day of the week, right? For instance, take an average of all Mondays, take an average of all Tuesdays, take an average of all Wednesday, and so on. So here you will have the forecast for a typical week. Then come here. Organize now your data this way. You have the date here at the top. And also don't forget to have the day of the week at the top. So this is derived from this date here. So after doing that, we need to translate this into a daily forecast for all days of January. So you come here, use now the index and match, of which I took you through, and by now I'm confident you know how to use the index and match. And now you see the power of index and match. That's the way I was illustrating the other day. You can see it as assisted as here very much. Get the forecast per interval. So this is different, or this scenario is different. For instance, if we wanted to achieve this by using VLOOKUP or either HLOOKUP, for example, we'll have to write so many VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP functions for each day for 31 days of January, which is not efficient. So the index and match here has helped us to fill the forecast for all days of the month. Are we together up to that point?
We are trying.
Nini ngumu hapo?
Hey, Fred. Leo
Vayo uko sawa? How are you?
nimesema leo si kama jana.
What's hard here?
You are using very complex formulas. Hizo combinations zote
Kutoka tu uanze.
kidogo sana.
So, the index and match function is something that we covered previously, and nothing different has changed regarding its use. So, ukitaka kutumia index and match, I'll explain in Swahili then. So, ukitaka kutumia index and match in our scenario here, let me just erase this. Sawa, si umefanya forecast yako, umechukua averages for each day of the week from the historical data here. So our historical data ni hizi zenye unaona week 50, week 49, week 52, week 51. That is our historical data. So our weekly forecast, we are forecasting for a typical week in January. And we've just done it very simply because we've just taken the averages for particular days of the week from the historical data. This is the historical data here. So, nimechukua average ya Monday ya week 52, nikachukua average ya 51 ya Monday, nikachukua ingine average ya week 53, that is week 50 on a Monday, and then pia Monday ya week 49 nimechukua nikapata average. So what that is giving me, it is giving me the forecast for a typical Monday in the month of January. Tuko pamoja hadi hapo? Hello?
Tutapitia recording tena Fred.
Hakuna cha kusema utapitia recording kama hata hujapata idea hapa. So tulianza aje? Tulianza hivi, tukasema hii ndio data tuko nayo hapa. So hii data iko na date, and this is the date the calls are coming in. These are the hour intervals the calls are coming in, and these are the actual number of calls that came in. So we've derived the day of the week, right, from the date, and also we've derived the week. These are now the weeks from this data. So this data is for the month of December. So we need to use this historical data for the month of December to forecast the number of calls that we will receive in the month of January. So nikakwambia after tumederive the day and the week, we need now to rearrange it this way. In that you have the interval here, you have the week here, and the days of that week. That is from Monday till Saturday. So tumefanya, after doing that, tumefind averages. For instance, ya calls zenye zilikuja on week 49 on a Monday at 6 to 7 a.m. interval. This is what this function is doing. And we've used just average ifs. Average ifs is helping us to find the number of calls that came in at week 49 on a Monday at 6 to 7 a.m. interval. So that's why tumetumia average ifs. And if you are not conversant with how to use average ifs, we have already covered this in our previous session. You can revisit the recording on how to use the average ifs function. So iko kwa zile class tulisoma mambo na count ifs, sum ifs. So that is where you will find the average ifs function. So at the moment here is for you to understand the core idea of what we are trying to do here. So we found the number of calls that we expect to receive in week 49 on a Monday. So that's what that formula is doing. So after doing that, you simply autofill the formula this way, and also autofill it this way. So that is week 49. You do the same for week 50. You do the same for week 51. Do the same for week 52. So what does this show you? This is the historical data for the month of December, but we have broken it down on a week-on-week basis. So, hapa kwa hii data iko tu by date. So, but we've just rearranged it for us to get those volumes on a week-on-week basis by using the averages. So take week 51, week 49 to 52 as the historical data. Now let us now do the forecast now from this historical data. So this last table here is the forecast for a typical week in January. And how are we doing it? We are simply taking the averages for particular days of these weeks, week 49 till week 52. We are taking just the averages per particular days of the week. That's why I call this a typical forecast week for January. So after finding the average, you simply drag the formula so that it picks for all days of the week and also for all intervals. Hope tuko pamoja hadi hapo. So,
what if you get an error? You can't using that formula. Like
error in
when you
terms of finding an average.
okay, so you can miss it again, but there's a place I'm just trying it, but
Always pata error if you,
I'm losing.
yeah, if you do it correctly,
Yeah.
you won't find an error. But if you find an error, recheck your formulas again to identify where that error is coming from. So saizi chenye tuko naye hapa in our last table ni forecast ya January, but it is a forecast for a typical week in January. So this is the forecast for the 6 to 7 a.m. interval for a typical Monday in the month of January, for a typical Tuesday in the month of January as well, for a typical Wednesday for the month of January. So we already have the forecast for January, but now it is in form of a week. It is on a weekly level. So we need now to translate this to a daily forecast. So for instance, we need to know on 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and so on, till the 31st of January, the number of calls that we expect. Hope I haven't lost anyone till that point. So after doing that, we now come to this other sheet for January forecast. For January forecast, make sure you organize your data in this form because we intend to get the forecast for a particular day in January, but we want that forecast broken down per interval or per hour interval. The way you see the layout is here. So make sure you have the date, yeah, and also the day of the week. So, because whenever we will do our index at March, we'll be referring to this typical week. And how is it structured? We have the day of the week, yeah, and we have the interval here as well. That is how it is structured. So having that in mind, now our goal is to get the forecast per day. For instance, for 1st January, 2nd, January 3rd, 4th, till the 31st of January. Then, by doing that, we have to break that per interval. So the way this table is structured, here, we can use the index and match function. So let's do it together once more. So we'll say is equals to index is equals to index. But remember the arguments or the syntax for using the index function. You need to specify the array. Array is where the possible answers can be found, where the possible values can be found. So I've told you the possible values can be found in this range here. This range. And I told you when you highlight that range, you have to lock that range. You have to lock that range this way. You have to lock that range. So after locking that range, we have to introduce the match function. So we talked about the match function the other time. So we are introducing our first match function, which will map out our interval. So we have the match function. Then what are we looking for? We are looking for the interval here. So this interval is what we are looking for. And where can we find that interval? We find that interval in the forecast. We call it forecast. We have the intervals here. We have to lock. Have to lock this. We have to also lock this. But remember, we need to specify whether it's an exact match. So we are done with the first part of the match. We've matched the interval. First, we've mapped out the array, which was our map. We've introduced the first match function, which has mapped out the interval. Now, we need to map out the second match function, which will map out the day of the week. Now we introduce the second match this way, which will map the day of the week. So we'll come to Jan focus and specify the day of the week that we intend to match. But because we'll be dragging across, we have to lock it after the letter. And then specify where is this found. This is found in our lookup array in the week-on-week forecast on the typical forecast week here. So we will simply lock this as well. Come here, lock. Come here again, lock. And then specify whether it's an exact match, which is something that we truly want. And then close twice, and then hit enter. So we find the number of calls that we expect to receive on 1st January. There are 13 calls we expect at 6 to 7 a.m. interval. And then simply drag down. We get the number of calls now per interval for 1st Jan. And then again drag across to fill for other dates as well. So we have the number of course we expect per interval for all other days of the month of January. So at the bottom here is now the totals, total number of calls that we expect per date till the 31st of January. Tuko pamoja sasa?
Fred, mimi nilikupoteza, internet yangu ilinifanyia ile kitu, but najaribu catch up.
Yes, I saw you dropped. How about Agnes and Violet?
I've
So
understood
fast.
the last section, but hey, first one still digesting.
Yeah, but
I think
I
I'm
want
going to read the last argument on that that formula. I'm not getting it how it picks. Like, yeah, the upper mwisho, but you had to click this forecast.
So remember we have this data in this form. I can simplify it for you. Hata nichukue A nileta kwa new sheet, sawa? This as values, no problem. And then yes. So tuko na hii data hivi. I want you to picture it this way. Iko namna hii. Iko namna hii sasa. Si ndio hiyo typical week of January yenye tumefanya forecast, for which tulichukua averages of the last 4 weeks per day of the week. So this is what we are having. So we want to translate this into a daily forecast. So this daily forecast that you see here, from 1st till 31st January. So when we look at the two tables, we have things in common. So look, we have the interval, right? We have the days of the week. Come to this other table as well. We have the interval. We have the day of the week, right? So because we have something in common, the commonality between the two, we can use the index and match function because it is the best compared to the VLOOKUP or the HLOOKUP. So that's why I said we will have to use the match function twice. So the first match function will return the interval, will specify the interval. So the second match function here, the second match function will specify the day of the week. And as a result, if we do that, it will be able now to match exactly. So itaangalia 6 a.m. na iangalie Wednesday, alafu iniletee value yenye iko at the intersection. So itakuja kwa hii sheet, iangalie 6 a.m. iangalie Wednesday, iniletee hii value hapo. Sawa. Same thing itakuja hapa ifanye ikuje for instance second, iangalie 6 am interval na iangalie Thursday, iniletee hiyo value 12. So ukikuja hapa kwa hii data itakuja angalia 6 am, iangalie Thursday, iniletee 12. And that's what you are seeing here. That's what you are seeing here. That is what the index and match function is doing. So also itakuja 3rd Jan. 3rd Jan itakuwa on a Friday. So for instance, let's say tunataka 7 to 8 am interval. Cause yenye tuta receive. So unaona hapa this is 47. Right? So what the index and match will do, it will come here. Tulikuwa specify this as our array, right? And then the first match function ya interval ndio hii kwa hapa. So itaangalia 7 am, sawa, na iangalie Friday here. And then itaniletea this value here. This value see here 47. Na ndio hiyo 47 yenye iko hapa hivi. Sawa. So it will do the same for all the days, provided we have the day of the week here. So, and it will now fill it out completely when we drag that formula for all other days of the month. I don't know if my explanation is clear right now.
Yeah, I've gotten it.
It's much clearer now.
Yes. So that is where the index and match is coming in to help us map out these volumes per particular days of the month. Hadi huko 31st. So we've gotten the forecast for all our intervals. If we need the total number of calls that we expect to receive in the month of on 1st of January, we simply sum this. So we expect a total of 1,867 calls. Here, a total of 1,876 calls on 2nd. On 3rd, we expect 2,383 calls. From the same scenario goes for all other days of the month. We have the forecast. Right? So hope you've now seen the whole idea of how you can do forecast by using just averages of historical data. Acha niwape time digest kwanza. Just think through it and just try to visualize the whole concept. Alafu mniambie penye kuna ugumu or where there is difficulty. You have to brainstorm, Brainstorm. So have you digested? Good. So I want to introduce another concept of variability or deviation. So typically when we do forecasting, so we give ourselves room because even though, for instance, we expect on a typical Monday calls to be the same, it might not actually happen. For instance, let me highlight this. Let me highlight this. Let me clear formatting. For instance, we have this Monday. You see, it's stating that we'll receive 3,102 calls. And then we have also this Monday stating that we will receive 3,102 calls. So in reality, that doesn't happen. Because yes, we could expect almost the same number of call volumes on a typical Monday, but they can't be exact number for number. That's why I'm saying we now have to introduce some concept of variability or some concept of deviation, because no 2 days are actually the same. For instance, the Monday for the 6th, if we expect to receive 3,102 calls, it's not the same as the calls that we will receive on the 13th, which is also on a Monday. So even though we expect almost same volume, it can't be exact. For instance, for all Mondays. Then for Tuesdays again, it won't be that same. So the first step, we've gotten it. But now we have now to adjust this to reflect reality. Sawa, kwa sababu hii Tuesday ya 14th, hii 22:34, hatutakuwa na the same number of calls kama hii Tuesday ya 21st of Jan, whereby we are also having 22:34 calls. It won't be the same. So we have to introduce some concept of variability. Yes, it won't distort our prediction that much, but it will allow room, right, for us to have that differentiation between days, because we don't just expect to have same number of calls. For instance, on Wednesdays. So how can we now introduce variability? That is the question. So I'll introduce the concept of the RAND function in Excel. So we have RAND function in Excel. RAND stands for random, and you can think of it as randomization. So it's random. When something is random, it means we don't know the next outcome because it is varying. That is what we mean by RAND or randomization. So we have to introduce randomization in our forecast. So when we say rand in Excel, rand alone, it returns value between 0 and 1. And each time you say is equals to rand, it will bring a different value, but within the range of 0 to 1. So it generates random decimal numbers between 0 to 1. So for instance, if I say it's equals to rand this way, it will generate value between 0 and 1. And each time I do the same function, it will be bringing different results. You see, this one has changed. Also, this one has changed. So that is random again. But when we are doing our randomization, for instance, when we say we want to do randomization of forecast for 6th of January, yes, we don't want to distort this number, but we want it to be within range of, let's say, plus or minus 5% or 10%. So we want that variability to be there. So we can achieve this by using this rand function. But remember, rand alone returns values between 0 and 1. But now remember, we need a plus or a minus. And rand in itself, it just gives positive numbers. So for us to get now the numbers that are between the negative and on the positive end, we have to use the rand function. So it's equals to rand function, but introduce now a negative factor. For instance, negative 0.5. For us to get negative and positive deviations. So that is where now the rand here is doing, because we need the deviation of plus or minus. For instance, if I expect 100 calls, if I put variability of 5%, it can either be 105 calls or minus or 95 calls. It will be in the range of the 95 and 105. That is plus or minus 5%. That's what I'm trying to imply. So having said that, for us to get that negative, rand alone won't help us unless we use rand with this factor of negative 0.5. It will generate both negative and positive values. So after doing that, remember, we need a value between -1 and +1. So if we need a value between -1 and +1, we need now to do something with the rand function. So the rand function here, it will give us now that negative element, but it won't add up to -1 and +1. So we need to multiply this by 2 for it to give the full range of -1 and +1. So I have to multiply this by 2. So I need to multiply it by 2 in order for it to give me a range of -1 and +1, because we need the deviation. So we can call that deviation x. X% deviation, which is something that we will come and look at. So when I say, for instance, when I type this formula, let's say is equals to rand, and then I say negative, for instance, negative 0.5, and then I multiply it. I multiply this, for example, by, let's say, 2. I multiply it by 2. What this means is, let me just highlight the formula and then I'll explain what this one is doing. So you see here, I'm having rand, and then I'm multiplying it by -0.5. So I'm multiplying by -0.5 because I need to get a positive and negative deviation, right? But multiplying it alone by -0.5, it will just give me a range of plus or minus 0.5. But what I want is, I want this to sum to either -1 or +1. Right? So this alone, without me multiplying by 2, it will give me a range of -0.5 and +0.5. So multiplying by 2 will now give me a range of -1 and +1 as the randomization factor. So what this is doing, well, we are telling now Excel, apply this randomization to the base volumes. So the base volumes is what we've calculated here. These are the base volumes. Base volumes, all of these one. These are base volumes forecast. So I can see Kinyo has left. Yes, but tuvumilie tu kidogo. So doing that means we are trying to make our deviation to be between -1 and +1. So after doing that, we need to now include that one in our base forecast. So in our base forecast, we will say now we want variability of 5%. We need 5% variability in our calls that we forecasted. So how do we go about this? These are our base volumes, but we need to introduce that concept of randomization in the call volumes. So we do this. Come here, multiply by the rand function. So the rand function, that is -0.5. That way. Then let me just introduce bracket this way. And then we are multiplying this by 2, just the way I've demonstrated. Yeah, we are multiplying that by 2. And then we are multiplying this now by the deviation that we want to achieve. This is the variability. We do this. And we lock it that way. But remember, this will just give us the fractional volumes. So here we have 1 plus the rand function. And then we close. So we've applied that variability there. Yes, Agnes, I see you had dropped. I don't know whether the rest we are following.
Yes, tumelipotea.
Or I have lost you. First of all, assure me up to this point where we reached here when we did the forecast. Assure me that you got that concept up to this point before we introduce the concept of variability by using the rand function.
Yeah. On the same, up to now, we're on the same page.
Sawa. So tumesema rand function inatumika ku add variability to the number of calls that we have received so far. So, and we've said what we are getting from this formula here is the base call volumes that we had state. But we need to add some randomization to it or some variability to it using the rand function. Now, so that's why I've said we will now have to multiply this by the rand function. By the rand function, and then specify it is negative 0.5. I've explained what it means. And then multiply it by 2, and then multiply it by the variability. That is, we want to apply 5% variability, which is this. And then lock this, also lock this, and then close. So this was 1 plus the rand. I hope you've understood up to that point.
What
So,
are these other values after rand? So it's 0.5 off.
so I've explained this rand function here. Sawa, si nimekuambia rand alone returns values between 0 and 1. So that's what we said from my explanation here. Rand returns the value between 0 and 1. That's what I stated here. But remember, when we are applying variability, we want a value that is a plus or minus. For instance, if we expect 100 calls, and then we say we want to apply 5% variability. So it means the calls can be on the upper end of 105 calls or on the lower end of 95 calls. That is what we mean by plus and minus, maybe 5% variability. So the 0.5 that you see here, this negative 0.5 you see here after the rand is used to force the rand function to accommodate negative values, because rand alone is giving us the positive values. But when we force it by introducing a negative factor of negative 0.5, it will now make rand to have values of between plus or minus 0.5. So that is what we will have when we introduce the negative 0.5. The end result of the rand function will be values between plus or minus 0.5. But remember, we need values to be between -1 and +1. That's why we are multiplying this by 2. So 0.5 times 2 gives you 1. That's why you are seeing a 2 here. So it will give you values that are in between -1 and +1. That's why you are seeing the rand and the numbers here. Now, what you are seeing B24 is the variability that we need to apply to the forecast, which is here 5% variability. Now, that is the 5% variability that we want to apply. So I know you are wondering why +1 here. Here we have 1 plus rand, and then we have these other values or other figures that you see. So from rand here up to this point, it will give us a fractional value. That is, it will give us the change. But we need 1 plus the change. So remember, this will give us, for instance, let's say 5%. So we need it to be 1 plus 5%. That's why we are having this 1. So when we click enter, we get now the adjusted forecast with the variability of 5%. So when we drag this, across as well, we have now the forecast, but it has included now the variability of 5%. So now take note. Now you see, this says that I had highlighted in purple, we have the same volumes. But because we've introduced the 5% variability, you see now these volumes are not the same. They are different, but they are close. So here is 4,127. And here is 4,018 calls. So we have that slight variability in the number of calls that we expect will be offered for these dates. So if we could leave it at this, for instance, this one could be 4127 calls. Also here we could be having 4127 calls, which in reality doesn't occur. For instance, on this Monday, I won't expect to receive the exact number of calls on the Monday that falls on the 13th of January. That's why I applied the 5% variability. So this one, you can play around with it. If you want to say, let's say you want to apply 10% variability in the number of calls, you simply come here, type 10%, and the volume change automatically. If you say you need maybe 15% variability, the numbers are also changing, right? So that is how we apply deviation or the concept of variance whenever we are doing forecasting. Ya, najua leo nimewapeleka WFM vizuri. Right? Understood?
I think I have.
Yes, so that's how it's done. So just understand what each function is doing. So for instance, why we say we are applying the desired variability. When I say, for instance, variability of 10%, that is the X. That is the desired variability that we need to apply. Now, X can be, let's say, 5%, 10%, 15%, whichever variability that you want to apply to your base forecast. So, and we have said that rand alone produces values between 0 and 1. But for us to get this a plus or a minus X% variability, we need to multiply the rand function by negative 0.5, or just say rand of negative 0.5, of which it will give you the values between plus or minus 0.5. But remember, we need the variability to be what? -1 and +1 in that range. So this forces us to multiply this factor by 2. So when we multiply 0.5 by 2, we get 1. When we multiply negative 0.5 by 2, we get -1, which is what we want, plus or minus 1. That's why you see we have 2 here. We have 2 here to adjust the rand to 1. And then after doing that, we multiply now by the desired variability. Variability is the variance, the deviation that we intend to apply. And that variability can be, let's say, 10%, 5%, or even 15%. So this alone gives us the fractional part of the base volumes, right? So this gives us the random fraction. This, what you're seeing here, it gives us the fraction, and then we need to add 1. And that's why I told you here, I'm adding 1, which is the base plus the fraction. That is, I'm saying I'm adding 1 with the variability that I have applied, the fractional variability, for me now to get the adjusted forecast with that variability. Was how? So that is just simple math hapo. So let's say, for instance, let's say the baseline here is 100 calls. If we have the baseline of 100 calls, and then the fraction part is giving us 0.05. So applying that formula now for us to get now the new forecast, we'll have to say it will be equal to 100 times, that is multiplied by 1 plus the variability, the fractional variability of 0.05, which is this. See? So, which will actually give me 105 calls because of that variability. So this variability could also be even be negative 0.05, which could now give me 95 calls. So for instance, if this was negative, for example, if this was negative, we could get 95 calls. That's why you have a +1 here, which is the base plus the fractional change applied to the base forecast. Hope nimeeleza vizuri hapo.
Yes, Fred. So after applying the variance, now there's a negative and there's a positive. So which one do you end up using eventually? The new figure, the positive.
Itatumia both of them. Kwa
So
sababu
utakuwa nayo at the back of your mind, but if you want to show anything now to the rest of the team, unabaki tu na ile the initial one before applying the rand formula.
si ndio hii, utabaki tu na ile ya kwanza. So nitakuja hapa na nitoe hii variability ya hapa, alafu tu nibaki na ile the base forecast without applying anything. Sawa, unaweza kuwa na hiyo kando hadi hapa na bado itaitwa tu forecast. Sawa, but just additional adjustment just to make it realistic to real scenarios. you introduce that rand, the rand, and also those arguments za kumultiply na negative 0.5 na 2, and then umultiply na hiyo variability factor yenye unataka kuapply. Sasa ukuwe na adjusted forecast. Sawa.
Sawa.
Yes. Yeah, so that's what we wanted to cover today. So the good thing, we have the recording. So you'll go through the recording. Where you have the difficulty, you can just reach out to me, and I will also explain in detail. So today I think it was a bit complex, kidogo. I took you advanced kiasi, but I believe I've made enough effort to explain, but I can also still repeat again and again. If you reach out, feel ushike, feel you understand this concept. Yeah, so with that being said, it marks the end of our training and also the end of today's session, unless now there's any question or comment on the same. And I'll also appreciate your feedback on how the training has been since we started, and the things maybe you feel could be improved on, or the things that were done well again. So I'll take both feedback.
I'll go first. The
Oh.
training was very educative, despite the many challenges that we had when it comes to availability and other things that prolonged the whole training period. But so we are glad that we have come to the end of it. Again, it's a very practical class, but unfortunately, some of us do not have the machines or whatever we need to make sure that we are being hands-on with this. But it's a good thing that you have always recorded each and every session, and we have something to go back to. Yeah, sometimes you lose us kidogo because una forget like you have an audience. But we always used to love those interactive classes. It makes us understand more and grasp more. So in future, maybe for the next cohort or any other sessions that you may have in future, you can always pause to understand, to get feedback, or maybe involve the class to get feedback on whatever you've taught, just to make sure that we are on the same page. Nenda sana before you ask, because sometimes we do not want to interrupt the session.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for the feedback. That's noted, Olivia. We'll go to Agnes and then Barrett.
Yeah, for me, the classes were okay. I would say I've tried most of the things. It was educative. The only thing with it is that machines kidogo, because the formulas you can't apply sometimes. But I hope in the next class we'll have everything required to be an A student. Anyway, that's it from me. We hope to utilize the knowledge.
Okay, so thanks for the feedback, and please, if you find any avenues of practicing this, it will go in handy in enhancing your skills. So we'll go to bio.
For me, I can say the class was it was good. At least we get to add a skill. Excuse me. We've gotten, or rather, I've gotten to add a skill, something that it's actually very critical right now when you're looking for a job. You have personally, like in my end, I was very clueless when it came to Excel. So at least I can say niko mahali kwa map sasa. I'm glad you've been of assistance. Hata na zile class tunaingianga, unatoka watu wakismile, zingine unatoka tunaangaliana tunashindwa we. It has been good. It has been good. And tuseme tukipatana tutakuwa tunafuatilia hizo zingine. Thanks for your time, Fred, for your dedication. Tunajua we'll be doing something, you'll be engaged somewhere else, but you dedicated this time to take us through the classes. Appreciate your efforts. Na you should lay them mbali.
Son, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, so also I want to thank all of you. You've been cooperative despite the many challenges tumekuwa nazo. Availability. But thanks, we've come to the end. And I really thank all of you for trusting that you'll get value for your money from this school. So I believe at least you've gotten something that can really enhance your skill and also can help you advance your career. So my only plea is never stop learning. So like the poor motto, never stop learning, never stop moving forward. So keep on learning each and every day. So kusoma haishi. So each and every day, learn a new concept. So even if it's just one concept, that's enough. So just invest in your career, of which you've already done by enrolling for the training. So that's one step. So continue, don't stop there. So after Excel, you can go to other softwares as well, like Power BI, SQL, Python, and the likes. So by doing that, you will be sharpening your skills and you'll be job ready. So opportunities always comes to those people who are prepared. So I don't believe in luck, but I believe in preparedness. When you are prepared, then the right opportunity will always find you. Yeah, so we will still engage because this doesn't end here. The way I stated in my earlier sessions as well. So we'll have a group for the alumni, for those people who've trained with us. So this being the first cohort, you'll have access to future trainings that will be conducted, and it will help you to scale your skills apart from what you've just learned so far. Yeah, so I don't have much, but just to thank you for your dedication and the time you've invested to train with us. So I think the next step now will be preparation of certificates. So I'll begin designing them. So when they'll be ready, I'll just inform you. So but it won't take that long. Yeah, so that marks it all from me. So mtakuwa na jioni njema, kutane majaliwa.
Amina.
Yes.
You too, and a lovely week ahead.
Okay, thanks.
Kwaherini team. Tawamiss.
Stop recording.
Yes, I'm stopping it.
Nitawamiss.